Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today I want to talk to you guys about how to effectively use rank up tickets and bio selectors, these green things that you get from Shadowland, that you get from logging in, and that you sometimes get as a reward for buying things in the store. Every so often we also get like check-in events, like 7-day check-in events that we had recently. And usually we do get a bio selector at the end of it or in the middle, maybe sometimes for 100, maybe sometimes for 300. And inevitably you get a whole crowd of people asking, who should I get this? Who should I use on this? Who should I rank up? Who should I, who? So, my dudes, I'm here to compile for you an updated list of the top 10 kind of unfarmable characters. Now, there are some stipulations for this list, so please listen closely. I will not be discussing characters who are bio sub only or bio subscription only. So Agent Venom, Kid Kaiju, those kinds of characters, even Gwenpool, no, they are off this list. Additionally, I will be scrubbing Sharon Rogers off of this list. She is by far the #1 unfarmable character in the game, but she's a character that everyone understands is good by now. I think it's pretty well drilled into your heads, so she is not going to be on this list. Just assume that she's in first place when I discuss the other first place character that I have in mind. So, having said that, guys, let's jump onto the list. At number 10 at the bottom here, my boy, Star-Lord. Star-Lord is primarily a leadership character that you get for the very good 45% to energy attack that he provides to blast types like Sharon Rogers and Doctor Strange. That 45 goes up to 50 with his new uniform. With his new uniform, he also has more iframes, which makes him easier to use. He's a pretty fun character. He's got some AoE. He stays pretty true to the movie counterpart that a lot of you are used to seeing, and you do get some music when you play his 5th skill, which is pretty cool. He's not a super versatile or flexible character, but he's okay in Shadowlands, but again, used primarily as a leadership type. That's why he's so low on this list at number 10. At number 9, a character that I recently tier 2'd that I'm not particularly happy with, but I know a lot of people really like, Shang-Chi. Again, guys, all these characters can only be required or acquired from a chest, which means a bio sub or a rank up ticket or a mega rank up ticket, etc. Shang-Chi is definitely not a leadership type. He's only got the 24% as part of his kit, but he does have some very good single target damage. His 5th skill especially does give him a hidden 2 or 3 second immunity, I believe, and the damage that it does is fantastic. He does take a hit when he starts fighting against multiple opponents, but against one opponent, especially with something like Chi Reflect, which is his 4-star passive, it really helps him to maintain his survivability while charging out a lot of damage. He can boost his own damage in addition to that, so he really cranks it out, and his tier 2 passive is pretty good. Additional damage when he takes damage. Really, really good. Next up on the list at number 8, we have Hulkbuster. Hulkbuster has a little bit of a controversy because he appears to get actually worse at tier 2. And the controversy surrounding this tier 2 is with his 4-star passive heavy duty exo frame. Now at tier 1, it gives him a really good 10 seconds of physical immunity, which people like. It's on a 1-minute cooldown, which is pretty brutal, but it is 10 seconds. However, when you get system upgrade as tier 2 passive, it says there enhances the effective skill heavy duty exo frame. That 10 seconds of physical immunity turns into 5 seconds of all immunity. Now, I do think that it is better when all is said and done, especially with how heavy the meta is for energy damage types, but a lot of people see that 5 is less than 10, and you can use Hulkbuster in kind of a niche role against physical types to kind of counteract them, especially in something like a combat battle world where you're going to see lots of physical types. So for that reason, he does take a little bit of the shine off, but he does immense burst damage with his 5th skill and 4th skill combined. You can cancel the 5th into the 4th to get really great damage. You can see that in action in co-op, which is insane because he out DPSs some of the heaviest hitters, and it includes a bind, which is particularly annoying in Shadowlands. So be careful if you're doing that combat relay. Hulkbuster will snare you and you will die a missile-ridden death. At number 7 on the list, one of my all-time favorite characters. He's taken a huge hit recently, but I still like him. Moon Knight. Moon Knight does have some good iframes and some good AoE damage on his 5th skill. With his uniform, he gets an additional iframe on his 2nd skill, Crescent Darts, which is fun to use. He really only shines in the moonlight when he gets his tier 2 passive because it gives him that heal, but he still suffers from the fact that the damage that he produces is really low unless you give him a damage proc and you really time his damage proc with his 5th skill, which deals the most damage. He does have a 3-second stun on his 4th skill that you can cancel, so he is decent for Shadowlands, but there are better options in the combat class, especially for Extreme Alliance battle. That's why he's, again, not even in the top 5, unfortunately. Ahead of Moon Knight, and also starting with the letter M, is Medusa. Medusa, on the other hand, deals respectable damage and even cranks out her own damage with her leadership, boosting herself by 36%, which is not a small number. In addition to that, she has a very flexible 4-stat boost tier 2 passive. She also has immunity granted to her by Hair Blossom. She's got 2 iframes, and as far as animations go, Medusa is one of the best in the game. So when the Inhumans show inevitably bombs, I hope it won't, but let's say it bombs, at least you'll have a Medusa tier 1 or tier 2 to dry your tears with on her cool looking, well animated hair. Number 5 is actually 3 characters, and I wanted to shed a little bit of light on these characters because they're not bio subscription really, they're not really bio selector. You can use rank up tickets on them, so they sort of fit this list, and you can use daily chests on them. So what a daily chest is, if you're not familiar, although you should be because you open them every day. In the store, under the featured shop, under the chest, you have this hero chest, which is free every 24 hours, and that number will go down, and you'll be able to open them faster if you have a higher VIP level. I believe my timer is 15 hours or 16 hours. Anyways, if you haven't already figured it out, I'm talking about the A-Force, boys. She-Hulk, Singularity, and Sister Grimm. I'm talking about all 3 of those characters at number 5, and I think it's a fair place to put them on this list because the overall top character from the 3 is definitely She-Hulk for a lot of the same reasons that Star-Lord is a good character. It's that leadership enhanced by her uniform, just like Star-Lord. She provides a separate multiplier to your damage. So you calculate the damage with energy attack, you calculate it with ignore defense, and then you get this multiplier that comes in at the end. It's either 0.48 or it's 0.55, and or 1 point, and it multiplies on top of your damage, and it really spikes. You see it in No Restriction Day with Doctor Strange or Sharon Rogers being paired up with She-Hulk, and that is the main reason why. But don't get me wrong, She-Hulk's not a bad character on her own. She does throw a frickin' taxi at you, which is amazing, and her tier 2 passive, immune to guard break, all defense, damage reduction. She doesn't have a heal, but that's basically all she's missing. Very fun character, good single target DPS. A little bit lower on the list, but still, you know, respectable for top 5 as part of the A-Force, Singularity. We've talked about her potential in Alliance Conquest before, and you can definitely see it from her tier 2 passive. 40% guaranteed dodge is nothing to joke about. She also has multiple iframes, very cool looking animations, especially with Dimensional Tear, opening up all these energy blasts that rain down on the opponent. And she's a fun little character to use. A little bit slow, but she has a lot of movement on her skills to compensate. Lastly, as part of the A-Force, Sister Grimm. Now, I know a lot of you guys really like Sister Grimm. You think that she's a very, iconic character. I know we have a lot of Nico fans, but I gotta put her 3rd on this list. Her damage is pretty good, but ever since the nerf, kind of stealth nerf, to her summons, that they don't grab aggro anymore, it's very hard to keep her alive, even with her tier 2 passive that heals her and gives her a guard. It's just not enough to keep her alive. She's very, very fragile. And her leadership looks like it would be better given the meta for energy types, but 30% is just not enough in most instances. Although it is fun to try and find a creative way to use this leadership, she's still a decent character at tier 1. Now, before we get into the top 4 picks, guys, I wanted to give you guys some honorable mentions that didn't make the list, but that I definitely considered heavily given their niche skills or niche skills. Miles Morales is definitely an honorable mention. Not great at tier 1, still missing those full iframes at tier 2, but his tier 2 passive is bonkers. That extra damage to supervillains really comes through as long as it doesn't get debuffed, and he can deal insane damage. Another one that I have tier 2 that didn't make the list, Kamala Khan. Much like Moon Knight, damage is so-so. With the tier 2 passive, the healing becomes basically like a second life. Accelerated healing jumps up to a 30% chunk, so you give her an obelisk with it, invincibility and recovery rate or max HP, and she can just bounce back and forth between life and death, all the while growing and shrinking her arms and legs to beat up your opponent. And lastly, the final characters from the honorable mention, Amadeus Cho. We did a review on him recently. Again, not particularly great at tier 1, definitely needs his uniform and does shine most at tier 2 when he gets those whopping 4 bonuses to his kit. Lastly, Destroyer. I felt a little bit uncomfortable putting Destroyer on this list because he's strictly a PvP, a player versus player type of character for something like Conquest or Timeline Battle. But I must say, in those modes, he is one of the best. He can counter basically all of the top metas. Jean Grey, Doctor Strange, Odin, Dormammu, you name it. Any energy type, he will crush them with his Reflect. It's a little bit hard to use. You're kind of gambling a little bit because if he gets hit by a physical type and gets taken down, or if they iframe him, he won't reflect. But in every other situation, he becomes a major proximity pylon for massive damage to other energy types, which does create a lot of counterplay and kind of thinking and strategizing in those PvP type modes. Now, the top 4 characters I selected for you. At number 4, Red Hulk. Definitely does better with his uniform, but with his tier 2 passive, he gets a better heal. He gets a 30% decrease of damage received. Absorb radiation hits for 15%, which is great. Lots of self buffs. With his uniform, he also gets 3 seconds of immunity, and he deals insane damage, especially when buffed by his own leadership. That 60% is very, very useful. Number 3 on the list, Silk. Silk is one of the better speed characters in the game. Very, very good single target DPS, so she's good in one-on-one situations. Because of her guard, she's also good against most world bosses. She only has 1 iframe, but she does do great damage, and it gets a lot better at tier 2, so that's why she creeped up on this list at number 3. And if you want to get her uniform, you're in store for a lot of crowd control and a lot of webbing fun that helps out in Shadowlands and in PvP mode. The top 2 characters on this list, before I get to them, are kind of interchangeable. Some people will say that number 2 is number 1. Some people say number 1 is number 2. I feel like these characters are basically the same. The thing that separates them is I think that number 2 is better at tier 1 and number 1 is better at tier 2. So use that judgment when choosing which one you want to invest in. But for me, at number 2, Mantis. Mantis, I think, is a fantastic character at tier 1. Lots of iframes, crowd control with the fear effect on Psychomancy, lots of healing with self-healing, 5% for 3 seconds, anytime she's under 90%, and she deals respectable damage. She also has a buff for dodge rate, which is not very useful, but overall she's a very fun character. She just doesn't get a lot from her tier 2 passive. Crit damage and ignore defense is just okay. She doesn't get any bonus or skill damage improvements, so that's why she had to land at number 2, but still definitely not a bad choice at all if you want a solid blast character that's going to help you out against world bosses, Shadowland, basically everything except Extreme Alliance Battle. She will shine through. And at number 1, if you haven't already guessed it, the newest Ghost Rider, Robbie Reyes, a fan favorite. I know you guys really dig him, and I did warm up to him, pun intended, after trying him out. I thought at tier 1 that his damage was not particularly great. He does have a more relevant flame retardant 4-star passive, which does help him to stay alive a little bit longer against the likes of Dormammu, and more recently Jean Grey. But it's really the iframes on skills 4, 5, and 6 that make him exceptional. Just like Mantis, he can iframe kind of constantly or almost constantly. He doesn't have as much crowd control as Mantis, but he does have enough iframes to make the opponent just stand there waiting for him as he goes through all of his different skills. Very safe rotation, even enough to counter reflect, either physical or energy type reflect, because he can iframe, and when you're iframing you don't take reflect damage. And his tier 2 passive, unlike Mantis's, does provide him with 4 bonuses: guaranteed dodge, guaranteed crit, and the extra damage to skills and bonus. Really spikes his damage up to a respectable level. In addition, unlike Mantis, he can produce a very respectable score above 100,000 for you in Extreme Alliance Battle for Universal Hero Day. So for those reasons, Robbie Reyes, not Sharon Rogers, is the #1 choice for your bio selectors and your rank up tickets if you don't already have him. And man, that car goes fast. Anyways, guys, let me know what you think of the list. Let me know which of these characters you would shuffle around, if I missed some, if I snubbed some characters, because there are definitely more that I couldn't get to either as part of the top 10 or top 13 or as part of the honorable mention. And of course, guys, if you like what you see, I hope to see you again tomorrow. Take care.